All right, today I'm joined by Jenn Quader, President and CEO of the Smart Agency, a communications firm specializing in commercial real estate and financial services. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, James. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I really love your profile. You've done a bunch of amazing stuff throughout your career, but you really do have like a non-traditional career. I haven't met anybody else that came out of the theater, in Broadway world in the marketing and advertising space. And I've interviewed a lot of agency owners so far, but tell me about like, what was that transition like? How did you move from that industry over to the advertising marketing industry, and what led you to starting or like taking ownership over at the Smart Agency?
Thank you. It's a good question because I do think that in today's world we are looking, or let's say society seems to be looking for linear path. Did you study the same thing and did you work in the same thing? And I think that I'm a good example of the fact that it's not just transferable skills; it's passion skills, right? So I think that at all ages you need to be looking for what lights you up, right? And so from a very young age, what lit me up was music and singing. I've always loved that. I still love that. I did it with my family when I was young. We were on television every Christmas. And like seriously, it's called the musical Michaels at Christmas. So I had this love for that. How did I get over to the PR side? Sometimes life surprises you. So as I was doing my schooling, and I was traveling and doing theater, it turned out the only course that I could take that I could graduate while kind of doing correspondence. This is long before distance education, was journalism. And it turned out when I started doing that, I lit up. There was passion there. There was excitement. I really like writing. So it's all about looking at what works for yourself. From there, I was doing theater. You mentioned Broadway. I did 2 national tours of Broadway musicals. I was in the Full Monty, and then I was the company manager of the anniversary tour of Rent. And during that time, I thought, I'm ready for quote unquote a real job, if you will. Theater is amazing. It's really fun, but it's contract by contract. I wanted to try to build something. And so I decided to go to graduate school, and it turned out that I found a program in global communications, and that built on the journalism degree. So again, it's like I've heard someone describe when a painter is painting a piece of art, they don't just paint what's there. They start with a blob over here on the right, and then a little blob on the left, and then they start building it together. And that's really what happened. And then to finish the story on that, I came back to the United States because I did my grad school degree in Paris, just to eat croissants and have fun. I came back to the States. I worked at one of the big 4 agencies, Hill and Knowlton. It was then HK Strategies, and I think it's something else now. But I worked there, and that again kind of cut my teeth in the agency world. And then I met a woman who had owned an agency since 1994 and was looking for a good succession plan. And I thought, let's dig our teeth in. So I guess what I would say, it's a story that you could go round and round, but I think the story is about making sure you're staying aligned with your own passion and then being really brave. When the opportunity comes to try to take over a company, do it. And it's not easy. It took 10 years, but I think that's how the non-traditional path brought me toward agency ownership.
Wow, amazing. I'm curious, like, how much did that kind of theater background experience help you in presenting? Is a big part of agency life, especially being at the level you are, being an agency owner, being at that higher level. A lot of it is being able to present yourself in front of clients, being able to capture attention, tell them storytelling is a big component to really explain like what you're getting done. What some of the threads, or what do you think other agency owners could learn of what you know about being able to present? And you did a TEDx talk, but you've done so much in the presentation. Like, what have you learned, or like strings that run through an agency presentation?
Look, first of all, yes, of course. There's a couple things. I'll start with something practical. I like to, let's start with the very most practical. If you're listening to this today and you're like, man, I wish I was a better presenter, the first thing to do is work on your breathing. It sounds so silly because you think, oh, I want to hold my face differently. But it's all about your breathing. I tell people when they're going to present and they haven't, done it before, breathe into the bottom of your feet. Like really deep breathing. And see, that comes from being a singer. When you're a singer, you learn to breathe into your diaphragm. You're literally filling up your belly with air. And you learn that's like a power, right? You learn how to do that. So I think that it's about learning these skills and practicing these skills. Obviously, theater helped me a lot with presentation. It helped me with voice and diction. It helped me with again, storytelling in a huge way because you learn how to, I think in theater, you're not just projecting, but you are also taking in. If when you're acting, as people say, acting is reacting, but truthfully, acting is listening. It's listening to what's happening on stage and then being in the moment. And I think that's what we all can benefit from when we're pitching a client. If we walk in there with our slide deck and we're just talking at them, we do this, we've been around since 1994 and we're amazing, we're not going to have a connection. And James, before we got on today, you and I talked about kind of the ethos of our business. The very bottom of it is trust. Like, you have to trust us. So when it comes back to these mechanics of what I was able to learn, I think theater gives you a confidence in your body where you are able to breathe, you are able to speak clearly, and you have a habit of listening and responding. I think the pitfalls and the traps are that what you don't want to do is perform for you want to execute, you want to think, but you don't want to be performative. And I think that would be one of the pitfalls, or one of the things to be aware of, is if I'm tired and I might fall into, oh, let me be the actress today. But we don't want to be actors and actresses in our work as public relations practitioners or as leaders. What we want is for that to really flow through us in a natural way. So I would end that by saying, if anyone's listening, I do think that children should do theater and they should do the arts. And that includes theater and dance. And what did poor Timothy Chalamet say? Opera and ballet. I mean, they should do it all. Like, I think that the arts open up expression, and especially in a world of AI, because AI is expressionless. It's just kind of it's a robot that's bringing us a lot that we can work with. We need the power of expression in order to really understand each other. And I think that's what theater, a background in theater, can bring.
Yeah, that gives the emotional connection to another human being, is that expression and how you can portray that and not just be like a robot repeating content on a slide, but actually have a connection with somebody. And I think the not the performance aspect is being authentic. Is that if you go too performative, right, you don't come off as authentic, as real. It comes off as like you're playing an actor. You're trying to portray something that's not really you. And I think that's where maybe some disconnect.
For sure. And I'll quickly just say, and maybe your listeners know it, but you mentioned that the name of your company is based in trust. And I think that when it comes to like bringing the world of communications into our client's room, we have to be good at presenting, we have to be good on stage, we have to be all those things. But at the end of the day, there's like an intimacy that has to exist between you and your client. Your client has to be able to go into a room and really tell you the truth about their business so that we can best help them. And so I think that it is about making the space for that.
Yep, absolutely. I know you've grown the agency a lot over the last, couple years. You've had a lot of big wins. Like, what's been some of the biggest challenges though with growing an agency and really taking it over and taking it to new heights and levels?
My dear. The challenges, I think, are all improving the ROI of what we do, is how I would say that. I think that when you are in the job of professional storytelling and positioning, there are a lot of people who feel like that can be done elsewhere, especially right now. I mean, it's happened over and over. They think, oh, AI can do this, or a kid in a basement that just got out of college can do this. And the thing is, it can. You know what I mean? It
Yep.
can. Like, a
Yeah.
kid in a basement can build a website for $300. AI now can do it for nothing. So it can be done. But I think the challenge is in really looking at, how do you deliver quality? How do you deliver and keep delivering? That's the biggest challenge. And I'd say that one of the tenets that we adopted really early on, because when I acquired the agency, it had already been running for a long time. And so we were operating on this vision and mindset of like, well, we know what we're doing. And we do, but I really changed the mindset within the agency, and we moved to a mindset of continuous improvement.
Mm,
So moving from, hey, we're so good, which we were. Of course we were good. But when you just sit in that, there's a way that you cannot advance. So I think the biggest challenge has been how to make sure that you're layering it. I think like layering like a cake. You need a layer of innovation right around a layer of solid, stable processes that are trustworthy. And so the challenge has been baking that cake. I think the way we've done it, the way that it's worked for the Smart Agency, has been about really investing in people. We're investing in leadership development for myself, but everyone else also, and really giving people kind of empowerment to both innovate and also to operate. And I think that that's the only way we can do it in today's world.
yeah. Absolutely. To go at your like first point of like anybody can do anything now. So like information is becoming less and less valuable. And I think services are actually becoming more valuable. And I think a lot of agencies are being concerned of like, loss of jobs or there's all this here, like you can be able to basically create a marketing department in house. But I think what you're going to lose out on that is high level strategic thinking and ability to know what's good from what's bad. Is that anybody could request a marketing plan or a PR strategy on ChatGPT. But how do you know what's real and what's good? And they hallucinate, they can make errors and make mistakes. I look at it as like a asking a junior employee that doesn't have a lot of experience to create something. And the big difference is the input determines the output. So if you can provide relevant, high quality content and give examples, that the better output. And I think that's where agency services will go is that you'll be able to agencies, high level agencies, strategic thinkers will be able to get better input and then get a better output. It's the same thing as like right now, I could go create a website and I could ask Claude or ChatGPT, write me some code, and it's going to write some code and put it up. But a high level developer and programmer is going to be able to get 10x, 100x the output because it knows what it's looking for. It knows what's good, what's bad, where all the pitfalls are. And I think that's the difference is that the implementation is going to be what's most important. The service of it and the output is where the differentiation's really going to happen.
Look, you said it really well when you said it's like a junior employee. I heard this high level software expert who'd been working on he's building AI platforms into these huge real estate companies, and he described AI as like the smartest kid you know, right? Like the kid who graduated from Harvard and Cornell and all of them at the same time. He can do anything. He said he's like your nephew, right? He can do anything, but he's stoned all the time. Can't remember a thing. Got to tell him every time what to do. And so I think that's really, it is important to see the tool for what it is. I think it's important too, though. I want to say it this way. I think there are lots of different pools, right? Like there are the people who are like, AI, go for it, invest everything we can, build everything in it. Then there's the people who are kind of in the middle. And then there's the people who are like, absolutely not. AI can't do it as well as me. Only a human's going to go. I'm sorry. Sorry to that last bucket too, though, right? It's the middle bucket that's going to win. We need to be AI enabled. And so, for example, we build websites. Of course, our developers are using and testing and working with AI so that we can then be more effective and we can deepen our understanding. So I think your point was well taken, which is the tool itself gives us more power. It allows us to go from 10x to 100x because we can do more things. What clients need, and clients, these aren't just individual people, right? We work in commercial real estate and finance. These are large entities. What do large entities need? They need systems and processes that build trust, sustainability, consistency, that build a reputation that proves who they are over time. And where do they have to do that? In the digital environment. They
Mhm.
have to. They can no longer just build their thing. So I think that what we must do as agency owners is we must think more systemically, more systematic. We need to be able to bring them programs that aren't just like, hey, get a win, but repeatable. We call ours like a machine, right? It's funny because we say it's humans running it, but you need a content machine that is constantly going, that to your point has an eye over it of quality and of really understanding, is this who we are? Back to that authenticity. You could send the AI out there to do your job, just like sending an actor out to speak on behalf of your company. It's going to do it, but is the connection there? I think that's where the sweet spot is for agencies in the future, is finding and creating that emotional, real connection.
While automating and getting more out of it. It's like that combination. That's what we're gonna figure out. But it's so new that I think that we're like in this learning curve of like how do you put all these pieces together? But we'll see how it plays out.
We are, but I wanna say this too, it's new and but then again, it's not, right? Like, years ago, Google came out and we were like, "Oh my god," but we all now, that's what you guys do, you run ads, you know how to do that, and there are things now that run like AI, that you start you can meaning you optimize a campaign and then it rolls, and it's been doing that for years. So what I'm saying is I think sometimes too we get afraid because we think this is all brand new. Back in the days of ad agencies, when they opened divisions because television had shown up. And it turns out we're all still storytellers, we're all still strategists, and companies do still need that.
Yep. Absolutely. Just to pivot more to like relationship oriented stuff is, you've talked about empathetic leadership and, that's an important part of your business strategy. Can you walk me through kind of like what that looks like for you and within your agency and what people could learn from?
Oh, yeah. Yes, and I make a funny face about it because I think it's ever changing. So I have called it empathetic leadership for a long time. I also refer to it as human first leadership. I think the human first is where it's landed. I think when I first took over as agency owner, and for those who are listening, I acquired the agency after working for about 10 years with the owner. And I came out and said, I'm really going to focus on empathetic leadership because I am empathetic, because it's just who I am. It's like, I feel things. I heard Kristen Bell say this recently. She was like, I don't know if what I'm feeling is your feeling or my feeling. And that happens to me. So it comes back to that, my own passion. But what I learned through that is empathetic leadership, it's something that needs to be very skillful. It's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? So on the one side, empathetic leadership is human first, it's listening to others and it's caring about their feelings. That is essential. On the other side, empathetic leadership can look like over clinging to your team or wanting to retain, like it can look like feeling things in a way that's not effective. And I think for me, what I've learned is how to skillfully focus on human first development. I think that's what other agency leaders can take from this. When we talk about empathetic leadership, first you need to assess, who are you? Right? Like, how, like, don't immediately just go like, let me look at 10 ways to be an empathetic leader and implement that. We wouldn't do that. That we're strategists, right? First thing we're going to do is look at ourselves. Who are we? Am I an overly empathetic person? Am I an under empathetic? Am I someone who like doesn't feel anybody's feelings? Is that my jam? Cool. Well, then I'm going to implement a little more empathy. If I'm someone that
Mm,
feels all sorts of empathy, like me, I'm going to implement empathy here, but I'm also going to add advisors and other people with other points of view and listen for critical feedback to help me make the most human first decisions. So I think that empathetic leadership is about self knowledge. It's about, which again is like a twist, right? Like you think it's about like being nice to everybody but it's actually about learning your own self and being able to process. Because I heard this guy say this recently, and I'll just get real, James, but like I heard
please.
this guy speaking. It was this thing called lessons in leadership. And these are people toward the end of their career, they've built very huge companies. And they're talking about all the different real estate downturns. And the guy says, yeah, he says, sometimes when you're the leader, you're just like vomiting from the anxiety and you just got to come on out and be upbeat, and be calm and like get everybody together. Right? Like that's the reality of leadership. So how do we do that in a way that's real? It requires empathy for ourselves first, who we are, and then for others in a way that says, how do I look at the human? How do I make sure that the human in this, not just a number, not just my employee number, and not their salary, but how do I look at the human and make sure that this is working? That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, like, at first, really starting with self reflection, understanding like who you are, what makes you tick, how you look at relationships and connections, and understanding where people are at. But I think that just really ends up leading to of like owning or like maintaining healthy relationships with employees and staff, right? It's like that's the end outcome goal is like you want to make sure your staff and team know you have their back, that they can trust you. You've been again, it all comes back to trust and relationships, and that kind of helps probably build a stronger thread of trust and relationships with your team.
Amen. Look, I think that is, you have to show up where you say you're going to show up, and you have to keep, again, it's on the leader, right? The leader has to keep driving it forward. And if the leader comes in and is, then the whole company is going to feel, so I think it is, when I look at empathy in leadership, again, I see it a lot as making space for what is needed for you as a leader to actually lead. Because we take, I think, for granted, or I don't know, we're like, I run a company and so I should be able to do this. Of course, but we all have these different energies that are moving through us, and we want to be as skillful as we can. And the truth is, even though a lot of people are sitting in their house, they're all working on AI, when you put people together in a room, that's when magic happens. And whether it's business or music or art or family, like when do you, listener, when do you feel the most magic? Is it when you're by yourself behind your computer, or is it when you're with a bunch of people? And so again, I'm back to, as you're leading an agency, how does that look in practice? I like to talk very theoretical, James, and I'll try to get on. How does it look in practice? Let's make sure your people are together. If you're a fully remote agency, make sure that you have some very consistent time that people are getting together. I like to say, we have to be comfortable enough to show each other our pimples,
Mm,
right? Like we
yep.
can't just show up like all fully made up, like, hi, hello, everyone. We have to be able to show each other, hey, I don't know how to do this. Hey, I'm having problems with this. So I think as leaders, we have to really be able to own who we are with pimples and all, right? And then drive things forward in a way that again takes the human element first. I feel like I'm not being very clear on that last part of taking the human element first, but let me know what you think.
Yeah. No, I love it. We always say like it starts from the top. So the organization, everything, the culture, the tone, the expectations, everything starts from the top. The way the leader sets the table of expectations, and that's going to feed down. How the leader relates to their staff, employees, that's going to be how the internal team's going to relate, or how you relate to outside clients or vendors or everybody else you're working with. And I think if you take a human first approach, like you're explaining, and the leader sets the tone that that's what's expected, then you have a better, healthier environment. If it's more cutthroat and attacking, then that's the environment and the culture you create. So we was just talking about like everything starts from the top, and that's what kind of bleeds through the organization.
Amen. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's why you got to focus on yourself first as the leader. Equally, I'll add one layer, which is to say, and this is something I've learned later, and and I've now owned the agency since 2018. And I think first I was like, let me get my head around myself, and understand how I can be the best leader. And then as we've expanded that leadership development to the team, I've learned a lot about the art of co-creation, the art of, and this is goes beyond, back years ago, you get together and go, let's do a brainstorm. Brainstorms are
Mhm.
great, right? They're great for creative projects. But this is about how to, again, in a systemic way, how to empower your people to actually create with you what is this vision that you want. And I think that happens through little actions. It happens through consistent questions being asked, and it happens little by little over time. Probably my favorite metaphor for that is like building a garden. I think
Mhm.
building a company is like building a garden. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not a gardener, but it's like that. You have to you have to be empathetic with yourself first, but then you have to like set everybody growing. All of your people are like your roses and your plants. And then you've got to let them grow. And each of them is going to make their own failures too. And you have to be okay with that. So it's a lot of hmm, it's a lot of life. I don't know. I didn't have kids, but I always think that owning a company is a lot like parenthood, is what I think.
Sure.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's messy and crazy, and then they grow up and they yell at you, but you love it the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, of course. No, that's why, like, a lot of times it's like your baby, especially when you start your own company and stuff. Like, it's like your baby and your child, and you're trying to nurture and grow it. And it's going to have some mistakes, going to have some issues, but you figure out how to overcome those. There's a lot of correlations. And like to your garden is sometimes you got to pull out the weeds. Sometimes you got to identify what's causing the issues within your organizations, whether that's a process, a system, clients, an employee, and remove the weeds in order to allow your entire garden to flourish and really blossom. Because a single seed, a bad seed can really corrupt a whole garden.
Look, you are speaking amen, and that's the hardest part of being a leader, right? You want to just build the garden, and it's also pretty, but the hardest part is you got to face problems squarely. When things are not working, you do have to pull out the weeds. Sometimes you have to build a whole new irrigation system, right? Like you. So I think that comes down to being steady in self. And also, I think it comes down to, and this is something I will say, I learned this term from, we work with an entity called Bell Leadership that's on campus at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And they talk a lot about the external environment. And the way that they would explain that, or I can explain it quickly, is like Kodak didn't really pay attention to the external environment. Right. So I think that's the other part of this, is that while you are nurturing first yourself, who am I? How do I lead? Your team, how do I make sure that I am nurturing this garden, but also pulling out the weeds, facing the problem squarely and doing those things. And then how do I go from there and really affect change that actually helps my clients. Like, hey, I was building a rose garden, but turns out my clients need daffodils now. You know what I mean? How do we change that? And I think that's what we are facing as agency owners today is we are facing the fastest changes of what the clients need. They need this. Now next month they need this. And I think this is where our mindset is so important. We have got to be in a mindset of innovation and forward movement and not afraid. Like I think those are the ways we move forward.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge because you can chase things of creating new things that really don't, go to benefit your whole organization. And like it's the pivot, the constant pivot. That's something that like my previous experience when I was an employee, the pivoting is what drives you nuts as an employee and the staff is that when we're always changing the goalposts. And I think right now is a unique challenge because clients, a lot of the agency conversations I've had is brands continue to increase pressure on services and demands of the agency while also at the simultaneously putting pressure on costs and expenses because of automations and services and the capabilities of some technology out there now. So it's a very challenging dynamic to balance as an agency owner is like what are the core services that you focus on and how do you continue to pursue those and deliver them at a high value that gives benefits to the brand and your clients while also not chasing every single squirrel that's out in the garden.
Look, you've nailed it on not chasing every squirrel. I think that's where the win comes in. I think you've got to look for win-win client relationships. I think there are a lot of people putting a lot of pressure on cost, and I think that maybe there are services that need to be looked at in that way. I think that as an agency owner, as long as you understand your book of business, you understand the people you're working with, and you understand what you can do for them. Like we look at our business, and I'm like we make our clients hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like hundreds of millions because they're fundraising at an institutional level. So when you look at what you can actually do, then it comes down to not getting too afraid by the narrative that says we've got to cut, we've got to cut. Yes, everyone is having pressure to cut. Why are they doing that? Because their technology budgets are going up. They're paying more money in technology, so they're trying to offset it, and everybody's feeling tight this year. But when you look at it, you've got to get, I think, underneath the current underneath, which is what's the win-win relationship for me? What is it that my company's unique set of skills is going to do for this company? And so I think it's not about fighting the battle of little fees. Like I just think that's not. It's about flying over top of it and saying, what are we looking to accomplish? What do you really need out of this engagement? I think that is where the best firms are going to win. Is really fly high level and look high level strategic, and then carve programs around that.
Yep, absolutely. And then just to kind of speak to specific services, I mean, like a big part of what you guys do is PR and communications and stuff. And like, what does that look like today as like, what's a good PR communication expert? And I imagine that's maybe different than what it maybe has been in the past, but like, where do you see is like, is good going forward, what clients like need and want?
That's a killer question. I love that question, James, because it's ever changing, right? I
Right.
think I would have said a few years ago that it's never been about the best relationships in my opinion. It's not because I think that if you're a good PR firm, you can get press and storytelling anywhere because you understand how to work with editors. So I think that what good PR looks like today is very holistic. I think it looks like conversations with clients that speak to not only external, which I think in the past PR would be just bucketed as just press releases, just
Hmm.
send those guys out. I think now PR is about looking at the entire holistic puzzle. It is what is happening in your sales, what's happening in your hiring, what are the flows, and then who's looking at what where, right? So we aren't only talking to your investors. If you're a large, let's say we work with a lot of like multifamily owners. If you're a large owner of multifamily properties, you have a lot of different people who you have to maintain good reputation for and relationships with. It's not just investors, it's also city leaders and municipalities, especially if you are owning in different places, your own hiring. And a lot of clients in our world, commercial real estate, they've gone from being regional operators to being big national operators over the last 10 years as this industry has institutionalized. So it's about helping them find their audiences, understand, what are the business problems they're facing and how can communications help them? I think that's the difference is we've moved from kind of press release distribution and creation, which is certainly just robotic and transactional, to very relationship driven, looking holistically at the external environment. What is threatening for the client? What do they actually want to achieve? And then being able to tell that story in trusted places. And that's where, James, I can't tell you today exactly where, because it's a trusted place for each client. Some clients need to be in institutional press. Some clients need to be in USA Today. So it really depends on what's the story they're telling and how do they need to be there.
Yeah. But a good framework or wrap on that is it's all individualized to the specific client, where their trust is built with whichever audience that they're trying to reach and connect with.
Absolutely. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Versus before, it was kind of pretty standard process, press release, you put out, some journalists would pick it up, publish it. Now it's really being more targeted, which reminds me a lot of like that's what like we do in the media buying approach is very similar. Is like, where is our audience? How do we connect and interact with them and distribute ads in an environment where our audience already is existing so that we can grab their attention? And PR is kind of going down a similar route the way you explained it, which is like identifying the publications, the areas that make the most sense that build that trust through the press that you're trying to get out or the communication.
yes, and I'll say one other thing about good press. I think that it is always forward focused, and I think that that is the challenge that most clients experience with agencies. You hear a lot of horror stories about how they were
Mhm.
taken advantage of by agencies. I think that if an agency's mindset is "tell me what you did and then we'll go get you press," that's the wrong agency. I think the agency's mindset has to be "tell me where you're going and we will get you press." An example would be if I'm working with a client and they've never been in a market before, I can go and start seeding that market with stories to get them ready before they're even doing it. If
Ooh,
they want to invest in a new property type, we can start talking about the fundamentals of that property type before they've ever even done it. So I think PR gives you kind of a workshop area. It gives you a place where you can get out ahead and start fielding information. And I think that is hugely important today because if we thought that there were so many signals that were jamming us up communication wise prior, like with our text messages and our Facebook and all that stuff, now that we're in the world of AI, we are bombarded. So capturing people's attention is going to be absolutely critical. And I think that that's where good PR is going to come in is how to capture that attention before you make the move, ahead of the game, looking at where you're not yet.
absolutely. That's where I see the convergence of all marketing is going. It's just like everybody's trying to compete for different strategies and approaches of capturing attention, whether that's like organic content, whether that's PR, if it's reaching people on AI chatbots or in search or on Google or on Facebook. It's all how do we attract our ideal audience, grab their attention so that we can try to move whatever forward for the business or the organization is like I see all those things are just like all converging on themselves and are all being having some interconnected play or a similar strategy at least. It's like the more consistent strategy you can have across all of those, then the better outcome, I believe, for the whole brand.
I completely agree, and I know we're about to wrap, so I'll say this. I'll bring it back to that back when you talked about the nonlinear career that I took. I used an example of somebody doing a painting, and they started with a red blob over here, and then a blue blob over
Mhm.
here, and then they. I think that what you just said, which was the convergence of all of these technologies, and we are making the painting, and the painting is even better today than it used to be. So I think those who are frustrated by or scared about AI do not be. We are painting something that it's going to be even better than it used to be. We just have to hold on and we have to keep ourselves in the seat and driving forward.
Absolutely. Okay, last question is one piece of advice you'd give to yourself when you're starting out your career or getting into the agency world, what would it be?
Who don't take things so personally. It would, learn the art of detachment. It's a Buddhist principle, but there's an art to being able to detach. And we talked about pulling out weeds and those things to be able to detach and face problems squarely while still being an empathetic leader. I think that's what I'm still working on all the time is how do I make sure that I don't fall in too hard. So yeah, that's my advice.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you, James. What a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll do it
Have
again.
a good day. Yeah.